Good afternoon, everybody. Half an hour away from the end of ChefConf. It's kind of sad. This is the first time I've been here. It's been a wonderful time. I go to a lot of conferences, and not many of them have a talk show style keynote, and I'm like really digging that kind of style. Everyone having a good time so far? Kind of like, yeah. This is the point where your mind is like completely butter, don't know where you are anymore. You're dreading drinking more alcohol, planning getting back into your own bed later this week, right? Okay, we're almost there. Hydrate, that's the key. All right, this is Compliance Slowing You Down, How to Achieve Compliance at DevOps. I'm Nirmal Mehta. I'm a chief technologist. I'm not chief technology officer, that's not what I am. I'm a chief technologist at Booz Allen Hamilton. Show of hands, who knows who Booz Allen is? Okay. So for those who don't know who Booz Allen is, we're a large system integrator, IT consulting shop that primarily focuses on government clients. You can find me on GitHub and on Twitter at normalfaults. I'm also a Docker captain. This is not a Docker talk, so I don't really publicize that much, but if you have Docker questions or anything like that, I can help as well. So what is compliance? It's the meeting where someone says no just before new application needs to go to production, right? It's that thing the auditors do once a year, and it causes a huge panic in your organization. Who is this like starting to relate with you guys, right? It's the Excel spreadsheets, the vulnerability reports, the false positive identification, and the remediation steps, right? And it's like NIST something or STIG something. Anyone here know what STIG is? All right. not the Top Gear STIG. That's not the STIG I'm talking about. STIG, whatnot, or that stuff that breaks our application servers. We have a firewall, and we installed fail-to-ban. We're cool, right? Like, is this kind of like what you think of compliance right now? So like these things, right? So what? You have your IT. You're the IT DevOps heroes in your organization right now because you're at ChefConf and you're going to go back and evangelize DevOps, and you're going to think, oh man, compliance is like that thing that's slowing us down. It's just like Speedy in Zootopia. Actually, that's that whole entire scene in Zootopia. If you have children, you've probably seen. I don't have children, but I've seen Zootopia like 6 times. I'm weird like that. But if you do have children, you've probably seen it like 30 times. But that whole entire scene, it's in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler. It's like a perfect analogy for how compliance feels like going through the compliance process. You know, you're that DevOps hero. You're trying to get deployed to production 20 times a day, and all of a sudden you need to get that that stamp, and it's a bunch of sloths. Sorry, compliance people. It's a bunch of sloths, and they're doing their job. They're doing it well, but it's like you're just tapping your toes. You're waiting, right? So. This is about what happens when your compliance organization or how you do compliance is like that. So what happens is you have some regulation. That's where compliance is coming from, some regulation, right? And because it's slowing you down, you go through this death spiral. And it starts with you want to get your stuff in production. You want to get your stuff out there, so you find a loophole in the regulation. And then because you use that loophole, some elite hacker, identifying with this thing on my shirt right now, exploits it. And then all of a sudden, you lose 25 million users, records, and whatever, and then you get a scandal. And you're on the front of the newspaper or the internet, and it's because of that loophole that you exploited. And then because of that, you're on the front of the newspaper, the IT security team comes in, and what do you get? You get more regulation. Hey, let's make sure that never happens again. So it closes that loophole. But if you keep going through this process, what ends up happening because of the regulation, you're bleeding talent. All the folks here who are hitting that wall all the time, you don't want to work there anymore. And it sucks all the energy out of your innovation. So you're bleeding talent and innovation. This is borrowed from a chef talk that Julian does around compliance as well. But I've seen, this is the world I live in all the time, and it's very much what happens. This is essentially why it's hard for the government to succeed in delivering IT, because they are bleeding a lot of talent and innovation, and we're here to try to inject that back in. So what really is compliance? So step back away from like those analogies I had before, but just compliance is really the discipline of verification at scale. It's not really like security and just like vulnerabilities and things like that. It's about a technique to verify the safety of the systems, right? It's what, at the end of the day, compliance is really about trying to make sure your environment is safe. And it's not really a thing, it's a set of practices. And applying those set of practices to your systems to get confidence in how they're performing their way they're supposed to. And there's this awesome blog, can barely read it here, but when the slides come out, it's Compliance and Velocity. There's some chef, I think there's some chef folks on there, but there's a blog post from Greg Elin, who's the GovReady guy, and it's about how compliance is not just security. Compliance actually scales out security in your organization. It's about the set of practices, the regulations, or the processes that help your organization scale out and secure your systems. And so if you kind of have to change your mindset. It's not something that's there to stop you from doing things. It's just there so that the organization can scale out the best practices. So what is security then? Security is actually a subset of compliance. It's mutually exclusive, right? Or not mutually exclusive, but it's mutually inclusive. So you can be secure, but that's not necessarily means you're compliant. And I bet that's most of the time what you're facing. There's a bunch of soft stuff there too, like auditing and making sure that you've checked boxes and stuff. That's not necessarily protecting against heartbleed or something, but it's still part of your compliance because it's the processes that you're trying to scale out to make sure your systems are secure. But what do you see in typical organizations in response to compliance is that you're not thinking about how to bring the security teams and the compliance teams into your DevOps workflow. So these are some of the questions I asked some of our clients and trying to understand why they're having such a big difficulty. And I want you to take this back to your organization if you have a problem, like these questions, and start answering them. So can your developers see vulnerability reports in real time? Almost every organization I've gone to, the Nessus tool there's no login for the developers to Nessus, right? It's like this thing that happens somewhere. Their manager gets a report. They don't even get a report. It's like once a month, once a quarter. Now, how do you expect your developers you're telling them, hey, we need to start doing this DevOps thing. We're going to deploy like once a week. If they don't even know what they're graded, it's like you take a test, you know what you're getting graded against, right? You're asking your developers to start developing, but they have no idea what they're getting graded against, right? So how are you expecting them how are you going to blame them for having vulnerable code when they don't even have access to the thing that's telling them that's vulnerable, right? So the first thing in your organization can do to speed that up is start opening up the data. And if you can if you have a tool that actually exposes as an API, that's even better. But expose that data to your developers immediately. It should be a part of your build pipeline. Like you can automate the Nessus scans or vulnerability scans and then expose that data. They don't need write access to it. They just need read access. And if you're really good, maybe you can integrate it into your CI/CD tools and your version repo as comments, right? Like if you can go get your interns, if you have interns, to make a chat bot or a Slack bot that does this, right? So that's like an immediate thing you guys, your teams can do. So anyone here expose their vulnerability scans and reports to their developers directly? Good. Has that helped? Tremendous. Yeah, exactly. No, it's not, right? No. Do you do static code analysis? I'm hoping a lot of folks here do that, but a lot of organizations I've worked with, they haven't gotten to that point in even testing, right? So how are you expecting, these are automated tools, it's very inexpensive to start doing that. Who else engages the security team too late in the process, right? It's like right at the last gate. So that's another thing. At Booz Allen, we spend a lot of time with clients and on projects resolving, security is a huge thing in our government clients, if it's federal or DoD or whatever. They spend a lot of time going through those processes. So we pride ourselves on engaging those teams early on a new project and early on in the development process. But oftentimes the security teams are not used to working, they're used to working at the end of the process. So, create a welcoming home and environment and get them into your agile lean processes early on. Have them be on those Slack teams. Have them be engaged in your version control system. Educate them on what you're doing and how you're automating your testing early on. And that can prove to be one of the most beneficial things, because they'll start to realize that their own team needs to start working in a more higher velocity fashion, and adopting and forcing the market to respond and making security tools that can be integrated into those pipelines. That's a big gap area right now. I see a lot of security tools that don't have APIs, can't be automated, don't integrate into any kind of process in an automatic fashion. The only way that's going to change is if you go back and force that to happen and send that signal to the security market, the IT security team market, and pick tools that actually do have those features. And I really hope we get to a day where all the security tools are just as automatable as your Jenkins pipeline or your delivery pipeline stuff. So, the other thing is throwing it over the fence. I'm sure everyone's seen Gene Kim's talk about DevOps and all that stuff. That's just not a good idea. Don't throw it over a fence. Bring them into the conversation. Have that conversation. And then the next thing you could do to break this spiral, right at the beginning of it, where regulation happens and the compliance kind of documents are being created, you have to inject innovation there to stop from going through the loophole and this spiral. I think this kind of makes sense. So what is that innovation? Well, we're at ChefConf, so the innovation is infrastructure as code. Took me a little while to find a good definition of infrastructure as code. There was Arrested DevOps. Who here listens to Arrested DevOps podcast? It's pretty good, right? It's awesome. They had an episode on infrastructure as code, and it was a chef person, a Puppet person, an Ansible person, and they talked about infrastructure as code in a neutral way, which is really awesome. And these were the two quotes out of that best captured what I thought the definition is. And it's you can reconstruct your business as long as you have an access to version control, data backups, and compute resources. If you can say that in confidence right now, you're probably a top chef customer, and you're probably I don't even know why you're here. You're probably like way ahead of most of us. But if you don't know how to do this and you're not confident in that statement, that's what you're trying to achieve when we talk about infrastructure as code. Makes sense, right? Another is if your entire infrastructure is destroyed by some natural disaster, or if you're like Nymako or whatever that name of that company is for Pokemon Go, and if you've done infrastructure code properly, you'll be able to rebuild at a new place using just the contents of a version in your repository, and of course data backups. Makes sense, right? So if you need to convince your higher ups in simpler language, take a picture of the slide, put in your own presentation, and send it up there, because this is how you convince them that that's a good idea. These are the kind of benefits of infrastructure as code. You get to test your infrastructure in a manner that you test your application code, and that's where I'm going to go with compliance, right? You're starting to test your environment just the same way you test your code. You're using version control on your infrastructure so you can see changes over time, revert, all that kind of stuff. You try to mitigate dev is not equal to production issues, and obviously that's why Docker is so popular and containers are popular. Repeatability is a huge thing. Compliance is almost all about repeatability and making sure that things are being done in an environment, essentially. Self-monitoring, healing, self-documenting, and then there's also an audit trail, and that's a huge boon for your security teams. You say the words audit trail, and they'll light up, and that's what we want, right? But right now, I bet you don't have an audit trail on your infrastructure, right? You might have a CCB team that has like some like notes about their meeting, or you might have some pieces of CloudFormation scripts in different places, but it's not really communicated outside of your team. What I mean about audit trail here is you have a full understanding of what's happening in your environment and how it's changing, and your security and compliance teams have access to that stream of information, just like your developers have or your ops team has access to that information, right? Bring them in. if they have read access to that, it's no big deal. They can see what's going on. So how do you achieve this? So one way in a example project we've done this is we went through these kind of steps. So use a cookbook, obviously, we're at Chef, use a cookbook to configure the OS to meet the security guidelines, right? So take a stab at that, and at the end I'll explain more about how, as a community, we don't need to repeat that, but take a stab at that and use a base server role, or a base cookbook to remediate all the compliance stuff, just all the stuff right off the bat, you know, failed password attempts, that kind of stuff, right? Then we used, on that project, because it took a long time to boot up instances and run, if you have like a lot of compliance structures or a lot of controls to put on a server, it can take like 30, 40 minutes to go through the cookbook, because you know, it's changing almost every file on the operating system to be compliant. Obviously, don't do that over and over again. There's a big debate between bake versus just do it every time. There's a halfway where you can bake just the base server compliant image, right? And so use Packer to bake an image, and then that's your starting point. And what we did is our base server cookbook role is in our pipeline, and the pipeline itself will do a Packer job, and it'll send a Slack message, and it updates an API that our provisioning system uses to find out what the latest AMI is. And so anytime anyone does anything on the base server cookbook, maybe adds a new patch or vulnerability control on there, it'll automatically start, you know, within about 20 minutes, it'll bake a new image, and that will be the new image going forward for any new provision systems. Plus, because you're updating the cookbook, anytime all the other clients do a Chef run, it will get those updates too. So you're kind of hitting both at the same time. When more organizations start to create compliance infrastructure as code assets, we can start sharing those as common configurations. The compliance, these control groups like CIS and all that, they don't change that frequently. And as a community here at ChefConf and in the world, we don't need to repeat creating the same recipe or infrastructure as code for every control separately from each other. We should, as a community, do it once. You know, it's the best practice way to tackle that problem, and then share it. I mean, there's no reason to hide that. Check out GovReady. That's a place that they're trying to collect some of those recipes for common configuration and compliance architectures. I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Using analytics, which is now, like all this has changed as of like yesterday morning, so it's kind of old. But using analytics to automate alert and take action on compliance configuration events. Now there's insights, which is even better hooks into it. But you can, you know, once you start using infrastructure as code, then you can actually do hooks into your other systems, like your monitoring systems, your logging systems, your pager duty or whatever that alerts and tries to remediate, you know, whatever vulnerabilities or out of compliance nodes you see. And that's if you start mentioning that to your compliance or security teams, that's kind of like their nirvana. They want to like have that. They're doing that on a manual basis probably right now, quarterly, once a year. If you're doing this every time there's a change in your environment, that's like a holy grail for those folks. So start doing that. And then the other thing is, say you're in the process of rolling out Chef, but most of your nodes or only certain nodes are being controlled by Chef. What do you do with all the other stuff? Well, that's where Inspec comes in. Who here knows about Inspec? Oh, wow. I don't even know where, you guys should be up here explaining that. But anyways, so the cool thing about Inspec is it's separate from Chef. You don't need Chef to run Inspec. And so you can use Inspec against your existing unmanaged nodes to make sure to see kind of what state they're in. That's great if you're the cool DevOps team and you're like doing Chef and, you know, containers and microservices, and all of a sudden your boss is like, hey, by the way, the old legacy team we're merging. Those folks are coming in with their servers. What are you going to do? You know, this is what you do. You start taking your inspect tests that you've already written for your infrastructure and start applying it to those servers and seeing where they're at with respect to compliance. And you can quickly understand and get an idea of what that environment looks like and how badly patched it is, or what vulnerabilities it's missing or controls it's missing. And then you can quickly assess what critical servers you need to start tackling and putting your base server cookbook onto. Make sense? It's kind of like an audit. There used to be this thing called audit mode. That's kind of being replaced by inspec, essentially. So do audit mode, do inspec against your unmanaged nodes. Okay, so obviously the tool to do this in the Chef world is compliance. Who here is running compliance right now? Oh, awesome. It's not many of you, so this will give you the reason why. If you're a paying Chef customer, you're probably already paying for it. Check on that, but it's a very lightweight server that you just need to stand up, and it provides basically a UI for all the results of inspec runs and managing inspec runs against your environment. Inspec, I should probably describe what inspec is first. So inspec is a command line tool. It's part of ChefDK, so you probably already have it on your laptops right now. Update the version because it updates quite frequently. And what it does is you define unit tests, for lack of a better term, in a Ruby-like language, and it'll SSH into your box and run those against that box and give you a report on whether those unit tests passed or failed. And the language describes, like, say you have a web server, port 80 should be listening, right? That's like an inspect kind of language. And then it'll go on that server and run that rule, and it'll say, look for port 80, and if it's listening. And if it's not, it'll say it failed, and if port 80 is listening, then it passes. So that kind of gives you, it's like a unit test for the state of your server. So check it out, inspec. It's very easy to write. It's a very powerful language. It's not just ports and like processes. It's all kinds of stuff. You can check the contents of files. You can make sure files exist, don't exist. You can do all kinds of stuff in there. We're running quick here. Okay, so what compliance is a out-of-the-box gigantic set of inspec rules based off of CIS, there's STIG in there, there's some other compliance frameworks out of the box, plus some base ones that they built in, plus the ability to bring your own. So it's just a UI with all those rules already built out of the box. Inspec, the team at Chef, they actually created a translator that takes SCAP definitions and automatically turns them into these inspec rules and profiles, and that's pretty amazing because you can take a SCAP definition that updates infrequently and automatically turn that into unit tests for your server, essentially, which is really amazing. So I'm going to show that real quick. It is really cold in here. I don't know if my fingers are going to work. All right. Can everyone see the screen? We're good? All right. So what I've got here is an awesome web service. So this is the Starkiller base shield control microservice, right? Oh, can't even see that. No wonder. There we go. So this is Starkiller base shield control. You can turn on the shield here, right? Shield's on, shield's off. It's very, very old school web service because it's like the first order, right? And so we have Chef, the first order is going to be a DevOps organization, kind of. They're going there. And we're going to run a quick scan. So this is Chef Compliance. Can you guys see that, or do I need to make that bigger? Bigger? OK, we're good. So we'll scan. We can see here that we have the Imperial compliance profile. So we need to apply that because my, Darth Plagius, Snook is telling me I got to do that, right? We'll do some rel 7 here. First order runs on rel. OK, so we can see here that, yeah, we're compliant. That's awesome. So I don't know why it skipped all the other ones. But you can see here you get a nice report of all the controls that it scanned. So I'm not sure why it skipped that, but Usually it'll all show up. I'll do it again in just a second anyway, but I think I've been running this every hour. Yeah, there we go. So this is something like what it usually looks like. So your environment, it's all blue because you guys are awesome. Everything's in compliance, right? But these are kind of some of the controls it's looking for. And what are those controls? What do they actually look like? Well, they look like inspec rules. And so you can actually open it up, and let's check one out. This is what a control looks like. So this random one is looking for a file system option character on special devices, I don't know, on the home directory. And that's actually a testable logical item. It's just like writing a unit test for a code. So this is, out of the box, it's full of these kind of things. Let's take a look at our Imperial compliance profile. There's two here. Make sure that there's a temp directory, and make sure the rebels have no access, right? So we don't want rebel scum. So it's checking for the rebels were here file, and it shouldn't exist. So now, unbeknownst to the first order, the Starkiller base web server is hacked. Let's see, where did I put those files? Let's do that. So, there's an insider threat, and the person, oh, you can't even see that, good. The rebel scum got in, and they got a cookbook in there that's gonna like subvert the whole entire system, right? And so this cookbook created a new file called root, rebels were here, right? And so, the first order compliance team, they're running their scans regularly, and what should show up almost immediately is, we got a critical issue here. We're out of compliance. It's like a threat of 10. So the other thing that inspec does is it allows you to assign a point value to every control. And so it gives you a quick way to make sure that don't have critical vulnerabilities in there, right? So you can get your own compliance regime. You can give different point values to different things, critical, minor, not so critical, things like that. And that can kind of help you weigh what systems need to be repaired or should be the main focus. So this one obviously needs to be the main focus. And so how do we repair that? Well, we need to fix our cookbook to make sure it's compliant. So let's go to our cookbook here. Recipes. Oh, look at that. There's a rebel cookbook in there. It's probably not good. So let's remove that, and then also let's make sure that hack never happens again. So let's add this to our base, our compliant cookbook, and like a good first order organization, we run everything with Chef Zero, right? So we're now fixing, I got the order from Kylo Ren to fix this thing, get the rebels out of here. And I was like, all right, I gotta get the recipe. Now, from now on, the rebels can't get in. Let's delete that cookbook. So, I don't even know how they got in here. So let's remove that. And now, the next time the first order compliance team comes around, you can see where this is going, but I should be back in compliance. Yep, yay, I'm back in compliance. Rebels are gone, yay. Woo. So I don't know if you noticed, but it runs super fast. I'm not sure why that other profile is not running, but there's certain tests that inspec runs that are actually faster than using like native libraries. By the way, Dominic, before you leave, Dominic back there, say hello. Yeah, you weren't gonna escape that bad. He's the guy who created inspec, so if you see him and have any questions about it, go tackle him. See ya. So, so that's the demo, all right. And then let's go back. Making sense so far? Pretty easy, right? It's easy, but there's a lot of complexity behind there. You don't have to write all the things that have to test Windows, RHEL, Ubuntu, where that file is, if there's content in the file. That's all taken care of by inspec, right? For example, if you want to know if a port's on or not, it's different in RHEL to find that out than it is in Windows, right? To make sure that port's listening. Inspec, well, I don't know if inspec runs on Windows yet. I think they're porting it, but imagine another flavor of Linux or Unix. It does? Oh, perfect, awesome. So yeah, so that is all abstracted away in inspec. It's awesome. It's basically just like Chef, but the opposite side of it. It's like the smoke test for Chef. It's the unit test for your system. I found this out from Dominic yesterday. It can run against running containers too, Docker containers. So you can run inspec against containers, bare metal, whatever. Okay, so these inspec rules and your compliance cookbooks, that's the innovation where you and your compliance and security team have the conversation around how to be better compliant and how to speed up the process. That's the point where you actually have that joint conversation around the regulation and policy, and to ensure that you're not going to have people try to create loopholes and then go into the death spiral, right? So your executives, your regulatory authorities, so this would be Snook, this would be Kylo Ren, right? And these are like the plebes on the Starkiller base. That's where you can have these conversations. You should be storing the result of those conversations in inspec files, in version control, in recipes, on version control. They should have all visibility into that. Your security teams should be the ones committing to those. You know, if there's a new thing that they want to test, make sure that the TLS connection is 1.3 with this type of crypto suite, inspec can test that. They should be the ones putting that in as a rule in your compliance profile, and it should automatically go into your process of when you're going through delivery pipelines or CI pipelines at the end or whenever you want to, probably in the beginning actually, check the server against that. They're the ones making those decisions, but you can see them as the people being accounted for in terms of making sure your service is running, and they're accountable for making sure they're writing the rules to test it and automate it. Does that make sense? That's really the power of this. It's a very simple concept. I don't know why we've not been doing it for a long time, but we should start doing it. Because everyone's involved in here, you remove the loophole. This is where the innovation is. So you decrease the time for security review, right? I mean, I just ran like 3 compliance reports in less than like 5 minutes, right? Self-service infrastructure changes. So that means that now, because you're running those tests against your infrastructure, people can start changing their infrastructure, and you can have more confidence in that. Improve customer service centric services, decrease time to value, all that DevOps stuff, right? And you have less vulnerabilities. So some lessons learned. Adopt a proven process instead of reinventing your own. So pick up Chef Delivery if you don't have a process already. Unit and integration tests are critical. Inspec is your unit tests. Wyatt, my colleague, did just a demo on how to do dependency testing for microservices. That's your integration tests. Aim for test-driven development for infrastructure as code, right? Maybe start with the inspec. In our teams, we have a template generator that automatically creates template cookbooks. So if you want to start a new service, and in there is an inspec file with an example test in there. And the test is check to listen for port 23 is open, okay? Open. And that will fail, like the test we put in there fails by default because it forces our developers to actually go into that file and fix it. And if they're in that file, then the odds are they're going to start actually writing the actual service that they need to test against, right? So we put failing inspect results in there as a kind of smell test to make sure that they actually looked at that and started actually writing unit tests, right? I might go even further than that, but focus on incremental improvement versus capturing the whole environment in one go. Don't have to tackle the world, just tackle the services that are critical now and keep chewing through them. Version control is important, obviously, and you can do automated OpenSCAP. So anyone here know what OpenSCAP is? Awesome. OpenSCAP is a open source tool from RHEL, from RHEL that runs these SCAP definitions and can remediate. Compliance is kind of analogous to that to an extent. Use the tool. It's open source. Run it against your environment. You can write a cookbook to run it on your nodes to get another compliance report if you need to. Don't use Chef roles. Who here is using Chef and are using roles? Okay, so does anyone know why, whoa, don't use Chef roles there? You've probably hit the, okay. You probably hit the one issue that we hit, which is that roles don't have versioning. So you can't update a role without destroying everything. So what we do now, based off recommendations from Chef and a lot of work in, you okay? Okay. Use role cookbooks instead, because it's basically the same thing. You just put the include recipe or whatever other cookbook you had, but that's a versioned entity in the Chef world, and then you can roll forward with your roles, which is important. Use inspect for compliance tests against your base server and your role cookbooks. That should be probably owned by the ops team mainly, and then use Packer to bake the images. So when you learn, we learn. We shouldn't repeat the process of creating infrastructure as code for all the compliance regimes. There's only one PCI DSS. There's only one, HIPAA. There's only one STIG. Like, I've spent almost a decade writing the tests for those things. We need to do it once as an industry. It should be published in an open source manner, and we can all benefit from that. So we need to share the best practices, share code, share defense. Security and compliance are no longer solitary things. We're all very much interconnected. You get hacked, we all get hacked. You defend, we all get defense, right? Does that make sense? We're all in this together. So when you thrive, we thrive. You can see I updated this from this morning. So let's build more secure and compliant systems together. This is where it benefits all of us, right? So let's build more secure and compliant systems together. It's not a scary word anymore. And if you write a compliance recipe, open source license it, and share it somewhere. I'm hoping some of the Chef people here, community leaders, maybe we can find a place on Chef, on Supermarket, where we can start collecting the inspect controls tests and the recipes to remediate them. We don't need to be repeating writing these. It's kind of like a waste of time, and it spends a lot of energy on there. And if we're going toward a world of enough OS, a lot of them aren't relevant anymore. So we need to really figure out which ones we need.
There is a classification on Supermarket for sharing compliance profiles.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. I should put that on here. So we want to make Speedy happy, right? These are some of the links to things I've done in the past and some of the stuff around compliance and security. Check them out. Check out boozallen.com/digital and bot.io if you're interested in Booz Allen, what we do, and how we can help you. And if also you're interested in helping the government change and be more efficient for all of us, taxpayers and everyone else. And then the most important question, you guys ready for this? How many Pokemon have you found at ChefConf? You found 10? Oh, man. So I'm Nirmal Mehta from Booz Allen, and I hope you enjoyed this talk. So.